Good evening and welcome to Sun Meadow Temple. We are so happy you've joined us. My name is Alba and I use she, her pronouns. This is our first June observance and I'm so happy you are here. As always, the service is recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. Please remember that this specific observance is pre-recorded and therefore not being given at the regular time and only posted on YouTube. Please submit images for our regular holiday video, sign up to participate in our ongoing community arts project, and come join us for LGBTQ plus bingo. And I have to say, happy upcoming summer solstice and happy Pride Month. So we'll open today with our opening words, which will appear on the slide behind you. Please listen as I read the words aloud or read along at home. We welcome you into the light of the gods and light this flame in celebration. May its brightness symbolize our connection to the gods and the natural world. May you join us in this community of faith, cherishing love and with open hearts. So our theme for this month is the hierarchy of nature, which I'm sure sounds like a very weird theme, but I promise it will make sense. And our readings today is Pliny's Natural History. The section is generally called by the public On Elephants, and it's translated by John Bostock and Henry T. Riley. We're only doing this section today as it is quite long and we are still only doing a part of this section. So we'll jump right in with On Elephants. Let us now pass to the other animals, and first of all to the land animals. The elephant is the largest of them all, and in intelligence approaches the nearest to man. It understands the language of its country, it obeys commands, and it remembers all the duties which it has been taught. It is sensible alike of the pleasures of love and glory, and, to a degree that is rare among men even, possesses notions of honesty, prudence, and equity. It has religious respect for the stars, and a veneration for the sun and the moon. It is said that by some authors that, at the first appearance of the new moon, the herds of these animals come down from the forests of Mauritania to a river, the name of which is Amilo, and they there purify themselves in solemn form by sprinkling their bodies with water, after which, having thus saluted the heavenly body, they return to the woods, carrying before them the young ones which are fatigued. They are supposed to have a notion, too, of the differences of religion, and when about to cross the sea, they cannot be prevailed upon to go on board the ship, until their keeper has promised upon oath that they shall return home again. They have been seen, too, when worn out by disease, for even these vast masses are liable to disease, lying on their back and throwing the grass up into the air as if deputing the earth to intercede for them with its prayers. As proof of their extreme docility, they pay homage to the king, fall upon their knees, and offer him the crown. Those of smaller growth, which the Indians call bastards, are employed by them in plowing. The first harnessed elephants that were seen at Rome were in the triumph of Pompeius Magnus over Africa, when they drew his chariot, a thing that is said to have been done long before at the triumph of Father Liber on the conquest of India. Pochiliasis, that those which were used at the triumph of Pompeius were unable to go in harness through the gate of the city. In the exhibition of gladiators, which was given by Germanicus, the elephants performed a sort of dance, with their uncouth, irregular movements. It was a common thing to see them throw arrows with such strength that the wind was unable to turn them from their course, to imitate among themselves the combats of the gladiators, and to frolic through the steps of the Pyrrhic dance. After this, too, they walked upon the tightrope, and 4 of them would carry a litter, in which lay a fifth representing a woman lying in. They afterwards took their places at table, reclining upon couches, which were filled with people, and so nicely did they manage their steps that they did not so much as touch any of those who were drinking there. It is a well-known fact that one of these animals, who was slower than usual in learning what was taught him, had been frequently chastised with blows, was found conning over his lesson in the night time. It is a most surprising thing also that the elephant is able not only to walk up the tightrope backward, but to come down it as well, with the head foremost. Mutanus, who was 3 times consul, informs us that one of these animals had been taught to trace the Greek letters, and that he used to write in that language the following words: "I have myself written these words, and have dedicated the Celtic spoils." Mutanus states also that he himself was witness to the fact that when some elephants were landed at Puteoli and were compelled to leave the ship, being terrified at the length of the platform which extended from the vessel to the shore, they walked backwards, in order to deceive themselves by performing a false estimate of the distance. These animals are well aware that the only spoil that we are anxious to procure of them is the part which forms their weapon of defense, by Juba called their horns, but by Herodotus, a much older writer, as well as by general uses and more appropriately, their teeth. They do not mean their teeth, they mean tusks. Hence it is that when their tusks have fallen off, either by accident or from old age, they bury them in the earth. These tusks form the only real ivory, and, even in these, the part which is covered by the flesh is merely common bone, and of no value whatever, though, indeed, of late, in consequence of the insufficient supply of ivory, they have begun to cut the bones as well into thin plates. Large teeth, in fact, are now rarely found, except in India, the demands of luxury having exhausted all those in our part of the world. The youthfulness of the animal is ascertained by the whiteness of their teeth. These animals take the greatest care of their teeth. They pay especial attention to the point of one of them, that it may not be found blunt when wanted for combat. The other they employed for various purposes, such as digging up roots and pushing forward heavy weights. When they are surrounded by the hunters, they place those in front which have the smallest teeth, that the enemy may think that the spoil is not worth the combat, and afterwards, when they are weary of resistance, they break off their teeth by dashing them against a tree, and in this manner pay their ransom. It is a wonderful thing that most animals are aware why it is they are sought after, and what it is that, under all circumstances, they have to guard against. When an elephant happens to meet a man in the desert who is merely wandering about, the animal, it is said, shows himself both merciful and kind, and even points out the way. But the very same animal, if he meets with traces of man, before he meets the man himself, trembles in every limb, for fear of an ambush, stops short and scents the wind, looks around him, and snorts aloud with rage, and then, without trampling upon the object, digs it up and passes it to the next one, who again passes it to the one that follows, and so on from one to the other till it comes to the very last. The herd then faces about, returns, and ranges itself in order of battle. So strongly does the odor, in all cases, attach itself to the human footstep, even though, as is most frequently the case, the foot itself is not naked. In the same way, too, the tigress, which is the dread of the other wild beasts, and which sees, without alarm, the traces even of the elephant itself, is set at once upon seeing the footsteps of man to carry off her whelps. How has the animal acquired this knowledge? And where has it seen him before, of whom it stands in such dread? Doubt there can be more that forests such as it haunts are but little frequented by man. It is not to be wondered at, if they are astonished at the print of a footstep before unknown, but how should they know that there is anything that they ought to dread? And what is still more, why should they dread even the sight of man, seeing that they are so far superior to him in strength, size, and swiftness? No doubt, such is the law of nature. Such is the influence of her power. The most savage and the very largest of wild beasts have never seen that which they have reason to fear, and yet instantly have an instinctive feeling of dread when the moment has come for them to fear. Elephants always move in herds. The oldest takes the lead, and the next in age brings up the rear. When they are crossing a river, they first send over the smallest, for fear lest the weight of the larger ones may increase the depth of the channel by working away the bed of the river. We learn from Antipater that King Antiochus had 2 elephants, which he employed in his wars, and to which he had given the names of celebrated men, and that they were aware too of this mark of distinction. Cato, in his Annales, while he has passed over in silence the names of the generals, has given that of an elephant called Surus, which fought with the greatest valor in the Carthaginian army, and had lost one of its tusks. When Antiochus was sounding the ford of a river, an elephant named Ajax, which on other occasions had always led the van, refused to enter the stream, upon which proclamation was made that the first rank should belong to the one which should take the lead in passing over. One called Patroclus hazarded the attempt, and as a reward the king presented it with some silver pendants, a kind of ornament with which these animals are particularly delighted, and assigned it all the other marks of command. Upon this, the elephant that had been degraded refused to take its food, and so preferred death to ignominy. Indeed, their sense of shame is wonderful, and when one of them has been conquered, it flies at the voice of the conqueror and presents him with the earth and vervain. These animals are sensible to feelings of modesty. They never couple but in secret. He, the male, after it has attained its 5th year, and the female after the age of 10. It is said that their intercourse takes place only every 2nd year, and for 5 days only, and no more. On the 6th day they plunge into a river, before doing which they will not rejoin the herd. Adulterous intercourse is unknown to them, and they have none of those deadly combats for the possession of the female which take place among the other animals. Nor is this because they are uninfluenced by the passion of love. One in Egypt, we are told, fell in love with a woman who was a seller of garlands, and let no one suppose that he made a vulgar choice, for she was the especial object of the love of Aristophanes, who held the very highest rank of grammarian. Another became attached to the youth Menander, a native of Syracuse, in the army of Ptolemy. Whenever it did not see him, it would manifest the regret which it experienced by refusing food. Juba gives an account, also, of a female who dealt in perfumes, to whom one of these creatures formed an attachment. All these animals manifested their attachment by their signs of joy at the sight of the person, by their awkward caresses, and by keeping for them and throwing into their bosom the pieces of money which the public had given them. Nor indeed ought we to be surprised that an animal which possesses memory should be sensible of affection, for the same author relates that an elephant recognized, after the lapse of many years, an old man who had been its keeper in his youth. They would seem also to have an instinct of feeling of justice. King Bacchus once fastened 30 elephants to the stake with the determination of wreaking his vengeance on them by means of 30 others. But though men kept sallying forth among them to goad them on, he could not, with all his endeavors, force them to become the ministers of the cruelty to others. Elephants were first seen in Italy in the war with King Pyrrhus in the year of the city 472. They were called Lucanian oxen because they were first seen in Lucania. 7 years after this period, they appeared at Rome in a triumph. In the year 502, a great number of them were brought to Rome, which had been taken by Pontiff Metellus in his victory gained in Sicily over the Carthaginians. They were 142 in number, or some say 140, and were conveyed to our shores upon rafts, which were constructed on rows of hogsheads joined together. Varius informs us that they fought in the circus, and that they were slain with javelins, for want of some better method of disposing them, as the people neither liked to keep them, nor yet to give them to the kings. El Piso tells us only that they were brought into the circus, and for the purpose of increasing the feeling of contempt toward them, they were driven all around the area of that place by workmen who had nothing but spears blunted at the point. The authors, who are of opinion that they were not killed, do not, however, inform us of how they were afterwards disposed of. There is a famous combat mentioned of a Roman with an elephant, when Hannibal compelled our prisoners to fight against each other. The one who had survived all the others he placed before an elephant, and promised him his life if he should slay it, upon which the man advanced alone into the arena, and, to the great regret of the Carthaginians, succeeded in doing so. Hannibal, however, thinking that the news of this victory might cause a feeling of contempt for these animals, sent some horsemen to kill the man on his way home. In our battles with Furius, it was found on making trial that it was extremely easy to cut off the trunks of these animals. Fenestella informs us that they fought at Rome in the circus for the first time during the curule aedileship of Claudius Pulcher, in the consulship of M. Antonius and A. Postumius, in the year of the city 655, and after that, and 20 years afterwards, during the curule aedileship of the Lucii, they were set to fight against bulls. In the second consulship of Pompeius, at the dedication of the temple of Venus Victrix, 20 elephants, or as some say 17, fought in the circus against a number of Gautulians who attacked them with javelins. One of these animals fought in a most astonishing manner. Being pierced through the feet, it dragged itself forward on its knees toward the troop, and seizing their bucklers, tossed them aloft into the air, and as they came to the ground, they greatly amused the spectators, for they whirled round and round in the air, just as if they had been thrown up with a certain degree of skill, and not by the frantic fury of a wild beast. Another very wonderful circumstance happened. An elephant was killed by a single blow. The weapon pierced the animal below the eye and entered the vital part of the head. The elephants attempted by their united efforts, to break down the enclosure, not without great confusion among the people who surrounded the iron gratings. It was in consequence of this circumstance that Caesar the dictator, when he was afterwards about to exhibit a similar spectacle, had the area surrounded with trenches of water, which were lately filled up by the Emperor Nero, when he added seats for the equestrian order. When, however, the elephants in the exhibition given by Pompeius had lost all hopes of escaping, they implored the compassion of the multitude of attitudes which surpass all description, and with a kind of lamentation bewailed their unhappy fate. So greatly were the people affected by that scene, that, forgetting the general altogether, and the munificence which had been at such pains to do them honor, the whole assembly rose up in tears, and showered curses on Pompeius, of which he soon afterwards became the victim. They fought also in the third consulship of the dictator Caesar, 20 of them against 500 foot soldiers. On another occasion, 20 elephants carrying towers, and each defended by 60 men, were opposed to the same number of foot soldiers as before, and an equal number of horsemen. Afterwards, Emperors Claudius and Nero, the last exploit the gladiators performed was fighting single-handed with elephants. The elephant is said to display such a merciful disposition towards animals that are weaker than itself, that when it finds itself in a flock of sheep, it will remove with its trunk those that are in the way, lest it should unintentionally trample upon them. They will never do any mischief except when provoked, and they are of a disposition so sociable that they always move about in herds, no animal being less fond of a solitary life. When surrounded by a troop of horsemen, they place in the center of the herd those that are weak, weary, or wounded, and then take the front rank, each in its turn, just as though they acted under the command and accordance with discipline. As we move into our summer solstice practice and prepare for the next observance, I want you to think about what elements of your own lives are controlled by nature and why Pliny places so much discussion on the social systems and even the supposed religious beliefs of these elephants. And we'll talk more about this in the next observance. We will now move into the ritual portion of the observance, and I will play the video. We leave this offering for our gods to symbolize our connection and devotion. We gift this rock to symbolize the stability of the gods in our world. We gift this water to accept the flow of our lives. We welcome life and bless our offerings with oil to share our riches. We embrace our connection to each other and the world and celebrate our revival. We'll now move into our closing words, and you can listen as I read them aloud or read them aloud along with me. As we move out into the world, let us remember our community of faith. Cherish love and open your heart as you walk through life. Hold dear the light of the gods and our connection with the natural world. Go forth in celebration and carry the light of connection within your heart. And again, I hope everyone has a wonderful Pride Month and a fabulous upcoming summer solstice.